Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I will be reviewing the Naked Heart Tarot. This was gifted to me by the lovely Jillian for review and it is the second edition of the deck. Quickly right off the bat, I want to say that I have worked with this deck for 2 months now and really quite inclusively at some points. I've gone through the book on several occasions and really feel like I've put it through its paces enough to come on and speak with everyone. My reviews, they still walk through the deck card by card in the right order, and that seems to be my kind of niche, I guess, in terms of being able to talk about my experiences and hopefully give you a bit of an insight to the deck, at least in my opinion. But also you still get to see all of the cards and the book, etc. There are going to be things that I am not going to talk about too much because they have been covered quite eloquently and quite beautifully in a lot of first impression and unboxing videos. With that in mind, one of those is the box. So really quickly, just for those who don't know, the second edition comes in a gorgeous 2-piece box with thumb holes. It is gorgeous inside and out. It houses both the little white book, which is not little, it is fabulous, and this very thick, sturdy deck as well. And I think that that in itself is a pretty novel idea, to be able to have such a thick guidebook, but it still fit in the box. I'm going to jump straight into reviewing, and I am going to review the book as well. So if you're not interested in the book so much, then if you look in the notes below, I'll put a timestamp as to where you can jump to go ahead and see the deck. As you can see, this little white book is not thin or lacking information by any means, and it's got the gorgeous elemental symbols and their correspondence on the back, which I believe is also inside the box. Now, if I showed you most of the contents of this book, we will be here forever. So I'm going to show you the actual contents page in a minute and break it down, then share some of the parts that I think are especially fantastic. It does start off with the Naked Heart story, which is really Jillian's story. It's very personal, it's very emotional, and she really walks you through the creation, so you kind of get to know her a little bit better. I like to get the essence of the creator behind the deck. Here's the first page of contents, and you can see that she has absolutely jam-packed it. Some of the things that are covered in this are very supportive to beginners in particular. I personally think that this is a beginner-friendly deck. As someone who wasn't drawn to traditional decks, I want to honour that and say that for artists, especially such as Jillian with this creation, she has gone above and beyond in making sure that there's as much information for a beginner in this deck that can be taken over to, say, a traditional deck at a later date, if that's how the person wants to start. You can see the introduction to all of the little bits and pieces to even how to read tarot. There's a discussion of tarot journaling, tarot meditating. The only bit that I read and was a little indifferent on was the cleansing of the cards, but I think that it's nice it's mentioned still. I cleanse my cards when I first get them. I just don't cleanse them after every reading, but I think that that's a very personal decision. And within this book, Jillian is very approachable. So when she shares things, she's not forceful or my way is the right way, basically. And there is even a point in the introduction or somewhere in the beginning bits where she explains that the card descriptions are by no means extensive and that there are still so many things that other people may see or feel or learn to add to those, and that they are just a starting point. They are still really in depth, and I will show you some of them. Some of the niches that this deck has in particular is its very, I want to say in-depth exploration of astrology, but I don't know if other people would agree. I don't know that much about astrology and the tarot. I knew all of the or most of the ones that signified with the majors, but not necessarily the court cards. And this breaks down both. It even goes into elements of the court cards, and there's a whole section on the courts that is really conducive to learning. Things such as, what does the page represent as an element, and then what is that within their actual element, so say earth and fire. There's also a whole section on the back of the card, which is a crystal grid, and how you can enter that into your practice, along with some crystal examples. So that's what I mean. There's quite a few niches in this deck that are definitely a welcome addition. And the good thing is, if you don't feel that you want to work with that, then you don't have to. It's not forced upon you. It's not interwoven into the deck in a way that it would hinder anyone. So for example, as I say, the astrology, it isn't a big part of the courts for me personally at this time, but it's nice to know that if I want to come back and look at that, then I'm going to have all of this information to do so. Just to give you a quick view of what I was rambling on about, this is what I meant about the court cards. They're also broken down into spiritual growth and maturity, and again, that's just another awesome way. This is really good for learning the courts. Like, honestly, I would have loved to have seen this in more books, to be honest with you. So you can see the breakdown here. One of the other things that I personally appreciate about the book is the black title pages, so you can kind of spot them. It's easier in real life than on camera, and it helps you to see where the book is broken up into sections. So you've got the major arcana and then the minors, and each minor has this wonderful breakdown. All the relevant information to this particular suit in a more concise way than the exploration in the front of the book. So it's a nice little reminder again for people. And you've got the addition of the statement, so for example, to will, or you have to be. After we've gone through all of the book, at the back there are tarot spreads, and there's a nice selection of smaller spreads, spreads that most people would be accustomed to learning. Traditional ones, so you've got the Celtic cross. Now, I haven't tried the full moon and the new moon ones, but I have every intention. These are two of the ones that actually interest me the most personally. Now, the spread that I was so happy to see is the final one, and it's the Naked Heart spread. I love it when creators actually include a spread that is the emphasis or the soul of their deck. And I feel like that's what Jillian has done here. It's not an overwhelming size, it's 5 cards, and even the prompts just feel very in line with the way that she explores the cards and her own sort of spiritual process and development. So we've got desire, subconscious block, conscious fear, talents and gifts, and trust. It's a really, really appreciated spread, and for me personally, it was a very powerful one. The dedication and the acknowledgement are quite beautiful, and if you know Jillian, then you know that she's very, very, very personable and friendly anyway, so you kind of get that essence throughout this. The final thing I'm going to do is simply show you an example of a major, a minor and a court card to give you ideas. Now, throughout the book, no matter what it is, there is a key message here, which I love because I've not seen that. I've seen it sometimes with the minors or sometimes with the majors, but not the whole way through. So for the Chariot, we've got channeling energy to be victorious. I appreciated the way that the messages are broken up. There's an exploration of the card and an identification of what the animal is, just in case you weren't aware of what they were. For the majors, there's additional meanings, which are keywords, and an idea of reversals, and then every single major has a breakdown of symbolic keys. The breakdown is really interesting. It kind of gives me that Rider-Waite-Smith feel. When you have a traditional deck, you'll often notice in the books, in some of the larger reference books, that maybe don't come with a deck, that they explore specifically what a white flower means or what a red cloak means. And I feel like this has done that, but in its own way. And also there's a gemstone if you would like one, the astrological sign, and a reflection. This is great for journaling. This is going to support you in developing your understanding of the cards, at least in my personal experience, if you're a journaler, because the questions in themselves guide you to explore some of the energies of the card. So for the Chariot, we've got, what are your goals? Is there anything blocking you from achieving them? No time like the present to get clear on what you want, followed by some action steps to achieve it. Now on to the Minors, and you can see that she hasn't strayed from giving a juicy amount of information. We've got the 4 wands dance around 2 connected, vibrant, happy sunflowers. This is a time of coming together, freedom, celebration and joy. So one of the things that she does, which again is very appreciated, is there's a brief exploration of what's going on in the card in terms of some of the keywords that might be representing. In the Minors, you've got the message, additional and reverse meaning. So they get about 2 pages per minor. You don't have the symbols, but that's literally the only thing that's missing content-wise as opposed to the majors. One thing that people have asked me a lot is there a specific part of the book which mentions why the animals were chosen? So I've gone to the 6 of Wands because you can clearly see there's a horse here. And it says, a horse rises above 6 wands in victory, surrounded by stars of praise. It is being publicly recognised for all of its hard work. So I guess in essence it is and it isn't. It isn't, I chose the horse for this reason because the horse represents. However, if you're more engaged or understanding of animal medicine, then you will start to see the links there. And the key words are, at least for me, representative of aspects of each animal's medicine. So horses are very much recognised for their hard work, for their power. And so whilst it's not giving you a reason in a straight black and white fashion, it still feels like to me it's in there, which is why it's not a simple yes or no from me. And one thing that I want to say is when going through a book that's this thorough, you kind of get to a point where you realise, you know, there's only so much information that one person can fit into one book. And I feel like this has been a really interesting deck because for a lot of people who maybe are less drawn to animal decks, it's kind of traversed a line for them where they feel that they can read the deck and not necessarily need to know the animal energy, the animal medicine, or work with animals in that capacity. That's a big deal for people, and a lot of people have said that to me personally, that they feel that about the deck. As someone who does work with that, I have no issue because I can already see why the links are there. I feel like there are nods to the links in the little blurb. And also, I guess because I'm interested in it, if I don't know already, then I'm going to go and look it up. And finally, we have the cults, which I'm going to talk about in depth when I go through the cards, because the cults are a set animal for each suit. And again, the blurb kind of gives a nod to the reason why they've been chosen without specifically saying why or going into it in further depth. So I've wrote a blurb down for each to kind of share my ideas why that animal medicine suits that cult. You can see there's a message, and then in these ones you've got spiritual growth and personality traits as well as a reverse meaning. And these ones do have a little symbolic breakdown before you move on to the next cult. I do feel in particular that this is a really good deck for learning the cults, and I know that that may seem bizarre to people because they aren't people. But I don't know, I guess for me they don't need to be people, because it breaks away from that. It's a girl, it's a boy, they're blonde, they're tall, they're short, you know, and gets down to the qualities and personality and experience of those cults that we can dip in and out of all 16. I think that's enough from me for the book. As I say, personally, I feel that it's very informative. It's possibly one of the most thorough Little White books that I've ever seen. And from the introduction to the quality of the information on the cards, I'm really, really impressed with it. I think that Jillian showed that she was going to be like that anyway, which is, of course, I only accept decks to review if I'm interested in the deck, and that it was so apparent that it was an emotional process for her as well. Now onto the deck itself. First, I'll briefly discuss the cardstock just in case anyone doesn't know. It's quite traditionally sized and it's got a very thick, buttery matte cardstock, but it's incredibly flexible, far more flexible than my second edition Wild Unknown, to give you a bit of an understanding. And this is my first cardstock like this, so unfortunately I can't compare it to anything for you, but it's a very, very lovely cardstock. The only thing that I've noticed about it at all is that when you're first getting to use it, sometimes it's got a little bit of grab, and that really starts to give up over time, which is great. And I don't rifle shuffle, but I feel that this would most certainly allow you to, if you can do that. The backing has the gorgeous crystal grid that we spoke about in the guidebook, and it's also on the guidebook and on the box of it itself anyway. And then you've got these two what appear to be lunar moths, I would imagine, so that it is completely reversible if that's important to you, and also it makes for a really nice crystal grid. Now, just a reminder as I go through the cards, this is a review, so I'm not always going to talk about what we're seeing. I will sometimes, but I also want to let you know a bit about how I found working with the deck. Some of the things I would encourage you to look at as I go along and you're listening is the amount of symbols that are in the cards. As we move through them, you're not only going to see sometimes elemental symbols, but you're also going to see some of the things that you may be familiar with from more traditional decks. So we've got the infinity symbol here. And then also you're going to have astrological signs and various other things that are going to signify meaning. So for the High Priestess, we've got this Hamza hand with a very all-seeing eye effect. We've got a small moon here, and then the large triple goddess moon. We've got the female and male symbols. One of the other things is that some of the cards are renamed, but in brackets in the book it will also say next to Earth Mother, Empress. So again, it doesn't really take you out of your comfort zone in that capacity. And this Sky Father is so much more on point for me personally than the generic Emperor, because I feel like sometimes the power and structure and those really sort of hot red colours that are represented in the Emperor, it almost sometimes detracts from some of the other elements, at least for me personally. And so the Sky Father and again the Sage, two names and two representations that just really, I guess, leave me feeling more comfortable with the deck and how it speaks visually. One of the other things is that when I saw this deck, in photos it just doesn't do it justice, and it looks quite beautiful in photos anyway, but there's actually a real depth to the artwork when you get it in real life. And so what I mean by that is this really vibrant, detailed, coloured portion of the cards, they really, I guess, entice you into the main focus of the card. and the details and the texture, I don't know what Jillian used to colour and create these, but they look like you can almost feel the texture. And then on a contrast, you've got this very sketch-like black and white detailing, and yet it still provides such important factors and quite intricate little details into it. So you can see here the owl, and then when you look closer you can see that there is indeed a candle in the background and also a key. One of the other things that surprised me with this deck is that it doesn't actually feel like an animal deck in the same sense as my other ones do, and it's pleasantly surprised me. Now, most of you will know I absolutely adore animal decks, and I have a decent amount of them. But this most certainly feels like it falls into the category of a nature deck, in that whilst the animals are very relevant, at least for me, to the message in the card, it's not necessarily relevant to have that understanding to utilise the deck. And also you can see that some of them, there's nothing to do with animal in it at all. So here you've got the lovely temperance being represented in its raw form, which I prefer. And so we've simply got the symbols and the scales, and then the colours that represent the water and the fire, and this sort of them coming together in a blend. It's all very, not that anyone else's deck isn't, but in this deck I can really feel the intent to show the symbolic messages, so that's something that I enjoyed. But because it didn't feel like an animal deck in that same capacity, I can imagine this being a great deck for people who like the artwork, maybe would like a deck a bit different to a more people-based deck, and don't necessarily feel like they want to go in and learn all of the animal medicine or the animal meanings. And then for those of us who do enjoy it, it's really a super bonus. We've got the scarab beetle for the sun, and again you can see the symbols coming in. Judgment is rather beautiful, again coming away from that traditional representation of judgment and maybe taking some of the stigma away from it. It's very interesting seeing the contrast between the coloured and then the black and white, but also for people who do use reversals in a physical sense, it would be very interesting to see the card come up like this. Now, one of the other things that this deck does is after the universe card, which is this gorgeous bumblebee, and there's a lot of significance to the bee in our universe, without rambling on about why bees are so important. Something that seems so small and maybe insignificant to so many people is actually a really large part of our ecosystem and a part of our universe as a whole. And then you've got the extra card, which is the Naked Heart, of course, and it's the card that you can see on the front of the box, which is over the top of the crystal grid, and it's really quite beautiful. This card has just as much of an in-depth meaning as all the other ones do. I personally do keep this in. I haven't pulled it yet, but I do keep it in, and I'm very happy for an extra card. I feel like it is a representation of the energy of the deck in terms of the creator's intent, and I don't feel like I would necessarily need the book to read a message with this either, so for that reason it is something that I personally keep in the deck. So just quickly before I start going through the suits, here you can see that every ace has an animal energy, and also when we go through, the courts have an animal sort of family energy as well. Now, the aces are different to the animals that are in the courts, but it's really interesting seeing these energies come through. They also utilise some of the colours that would be representative of that element, Another thing that surprised me about this deck is how versatile it is, and I can't quite put my finger on why. Maybe it's because not all of the cards are animal related, or maybe it's not simple. It has a lot to say. There's, as I say, there's a lot of extra imagery and symbols within it, but it does it in quite a simple, friendly capacity. The white space, it feels inviting as opposed to lacking. For me, it doesn't feel like this white space needs to be filled. Rather than feeling overtly light or overtly shadow in the way that it seems to express itself visually and the way that I work with it, it seems to be very neutral. And that for me has brought a lot of versatility to it. It has meant that more people are happy to have this read with, but also it seems to be able to speak on, oh, going too fast for myself. It seems to speak on quite a lot of levels, but many of you know that I enjoy mixing my tarot decks anyway, so that's something that comes quite natural to me. I've used this deck with both the Wild Unknown and the White Sage Tarot, and it's really interesting because I used to use those two together and they feel like a darker and a lighter not version of each other, but voice. And then this one feels like it resides wholeheartedly in the middle. Even the three of them work really beautifully together. And one of the other things you'll find is that it's not a pip deck, but it has that essence that allows you to maybe traverse meanings, or from, you know, a school of thought to say numerology with a lot more ease. It feels like it's given me a lot more room to be able to do that. There are certain cards where it might, like the Ten of Swords, feel a bit more structured in what it's trying to convey to you, but as a general rule most of them feel like there's maybe more room than, say, a traditional deck. Now this is of course a Rider-Waite-Smith deck, and Jillian specifically thanks the Rider-Waite-Smith and Pixie for the inspiration to create a deck, so it's not trying not to be one. But again, it's something that I personally have appreciated that has allowed me to use it in more versatile capacities. So here we get to our first set of suits, and these are the gorgeous Panthers. I love this suit. The suits in general I really adore. I appreciate when a suit has the same animal running through it. I think that most certainly adds a layer, and remembering that in the guidebook it discusses the maturity throughout the suit and how they progress as well. So they've been named in kind: child, youth, mother, father. Again, I really like the renames, and as I say, it reminds me of the level of maturity and the way that you might be expressing that energy. Is it new? Is it wiser? Has it been around longer? Opening up the cults for you. Now what I want to do for each of the cults, because I was very specifically asked this by a couple of people and I was more than happy to oblige, is to discuss what I feel the animal medicine is representing in the cults, how it complements the energy of the suit and what they're trying to say. Also, can I just show you how awesome are these? And yes, we can see that they are directional. I love directional cards. I do take it into consideration. Now, before I talk about my reasoning for the animal medicine, remember these are just my thoughts and opinions. A lot of my animal medicine beliefs reside in that it's very individual to the person. There's no one right way. However, at the same time, in all honesty, I do feel that an animal medicine, it doesn't just mean anything, if that makes sense. It's very hard to explain. I don't just work with animal medicine in a card sense. It is genuinely a part of my daily practice, and there are many ways in which I work with it. So I don't want to go into a whole spiel and take away from the fact that we're exploring this deck, but I certainly would say I'm just sharing my insights on why I feel that this animal medicine is reflective of these particular suits, and some of my ideas and how I've linked them. And of course, if you disagree or that doesn't work for you, or you have a different idea, then you just roll with that. So here we've got the Black Panthers. The way that I see this is I see the panther as exploring levels of consciousness and seeking out those unknown aspects that may be a part of discovering or understanding ourselves. So we're viewing this from a conscious and unconscious aspect. You know, this is the suit of swords, this is the air, this is the mind, the thought, the levels of consciousness. And now fear can manifest as part of our thought process as well. And in going deeper into our thought processes and healing through awareness and courage to change, then you can see how this, even as they progress through the suit of swords, that could begin in the child and end at the father. I see these as a representation of their willingness to be in the darkness, and how the shadow elements of the swords is incorporated. And then the light aspects is the willingness maybe to be aware of the mind and thought, the mentality of accepting the unknown as part of the human condition and experience. Panther for me is, as I say, very much about exploring those levels of consciousness and unknown, and the fine line between, can I get this from my unconscious into my consciousness, and also how can I learn to have acceptance in my mind about that which I can't control or that which I don't know yet. And so for me, this is why the panther was such a good choice for the suit of swords. Next up we've got the wands with the gorgeous tiger. And then you can see some of them change again into more, I don't even want to say nature based, but other focuses. So sometimes it's nature, and then you've got the crystal ball here. Now some of these cards have been changed from the original. I think the Four of Wands is one of them, but remember, I don't have the original deck. If I'm recalling correctly, I think Holly from Cape Cod Creatures did a comparison of the two with the differences. Six of Wands is another one where we return to animal, and in terms of animal medicine for this one, this works on two levels. You usually see a horse in the Six of Wands anyway. Here it's brought down to its basic core element. You can see all of the wands again very much coming into each other with lots of intent. And here they look very different, whereas these ones are much more spear-like. They're interlocked. You can see that there's conflict and maybe some chaos. And then you've got these arrows going in all sorts of different directions as well. So the directions of these, again, very thoughtful, very much intent behind it. Then on another level, the horse is a great representation of, I guess, wild power put to good use, and also hard work. And that's where that layer of animal medicine comes through again for me personally. The Seven of Wands, we have a very fierce lioness. And if you have ever seen a lioness who is protecting her cubs or protecting her food or anything in general, then you will totally understand that there's a fierce level of protection. But for someone that doesn't think of animal medicine, it's very clear to see that this is a fierce lion. And that's what I mean about there's that crossover. You don't have to know. It's not an animal with no presence to its movement or its being, where you're having to draw from what you know about that animal. We still have the wands, and you can see the position of them has changed now. She's got 2 defending her, but she's still coming into this core energy of 4. The gazelle's perfect for the 8 of Wands, and I'm so happy to see something there and not just the 8. The chimp for the 9, again, really good, because for me, they are, I guess, good at navigating things, and by the time you get to the 9 of Wands, it does feel like it's become a bit of a juggling act, knowing that there's a very good chance that this chimp will be able to navigate those, providing that they put their energy, focus and ambition into the right place, and that they're looking after themselves still. And what better symbol than the camel for the 10 of Wands? I could speak about this for an eternity, and I'm not going to, but I feel like camels have had to deal with a lot. They are considered very, very resourceful for many reasons in various countries, and really are a necessity to the people that live there in terms of being able to bring products backwards and forwards, or simply being able to travel. We know that they not only carry the burden of that sometimes, but also that they can go for long periods of time without water due to the way that their hump works. But there's a fine line between knowing that you can do something and overexerting yourself. So that's the kind of message that I get from this 10 of Wands. Then we move into my other favoritist suit, because if you know me but at all, you'll know that I have been working with fox medicine for an age, and I love it. I'll show you them first one by one. Again, take note, and Jillian does discuss some of this, the way that the lines are more contained in the child, and then there's more going on and they've moved, and there's actual movement in the youth. And then we come to the final, it's just, there's something about the father and the mother in each of the suits that really brings me quite a lot of joy. Now the father is facing more forwards on this one, but it does still feel like they can work directionally, and you can see that she has kept the lizard in this. Again, if I didn't remember to mention it before, we've also got the astrological symbols on the court cards as well, so you will see them on the youth, mother and father, not the child. Now there's many layers to fox medicine, and over the years working with the medicine from various teachings, then my own experience, then engaging with them in the wild, and just so many different things. But for foxes as a representation of the wand suit, I see this as highlighting the cunning of the fox and how they utilise their skills incredibly well to adapt to their environment. You know, they are very passionate creatures for survival, and they are tuned into their instincts. That's one of the reasons that they do so well, even given that we continue to build upon their lands, they continue to be hunted and all those other things. These are survivalists. I also see this as embracing the message of to will, which is the message for the wands. They have will, and cultivating flow, which helps them, their movement through situations, towards goals, towards desires. One of the other elements that I personally work with fox is camouflage, and for this I see that as being both a shadow and light aspect of the fox in the wand suit. And I feel like even that part of the fox medicine can be witnessed throughout the progress of the minors and not just the majors as well. Because I do see these as, whilst you've got the ace and they've got an animal and there are other animals throughout, I have personally see these as the holders of the energy for that suit. But that's, again, that's just my personal preference. Next up we've got the cups, and as I say, you can see this gorgeous octopus tentacle. And then we move into the hearts. I love this image, I really do. I love how they are connected, and again it's at its very raw essence, so it comes away from people, it comes away from gender, and it just sees us for the heart and the heart of the emotion and the connection between the two. The dolphins, I know for sure, were changed. They were rabbits originally and then they got changed to dolphins. And whilst I love both, I am totally vibing with the playfulness of the dolphins and how they generally go around with each other as well. I think they're a great representation of that kind of coming together. The 5, I love that the heart is blue instead. And not only are the cups toppling, but also we have the crow there, which again, there's a lot of representation from the crow that complements that. The nostalgia, we've got the unicorn, which I love. And the 7 with the giraffe and the head in the clouds. It just, and you see that works on that level without even needing to go there with why giraffe medicine might fit with the 7 of cups. You know, you can do that if you want to. If you're me, you're going to do it. But also there's not a requirement for it, and I think that it takes the pressure off of people when utilising animals in decks that aren't familiar with them in that capacity. The 8 of cups, the bear, it works for me totally. Knowing when you need to move on from an environment, knowing when you need to hibernate, knowing when you need to come out of hibernation. The 9 of cups is just absolutely stunning. It's just pretty, I've got nothing else to say. And the same with the 10, although I love that it's crystals and the thought of crystals and how strong they are as well. And for this one, we have the gorgeous whales. And I'm really sorry, I can't remember what breed of whale this is, although I did know, and I don't have the note with me. You can see this child of cups. They're very new in their development, not only in their stage, but you can see they haven't yet got the more bobbly bits that come through on their skin with age. And then there's a complete change with the youth and all the fishes and the water swirling around. And it gives, the knights really give the movement energy still in this deck without it having to be horses or them, you know, someone's hair flowing or something like that. It's been achieved beautifully with the movement with those animals. And again, we've got more of a directional thing going on with the mother having the starfish and the father having the waves and the fish. So when thinking about the whales for the suit of cups and the element of water, it does feel like a nod to the emotional plane as a whole. And I would imagine that most people would see that, not only because whales live in water, but the depths that they can go to and their energy as a whole. You know, even the fact that a lot of people listen to whale music to soothe themselves or to help them sleep, that's quite a commonly known thing in terms of soothing people emotionally. As I say, they reside in the very element that they represent, but also it feels like a nod to how these cults are able to navigate the emotional depths more than the other cults. Then coming in and thinking about intuition, which is another element of whale medicine, that can represent healing self through tapping into emotional needs and content, vibrations of the self being in line with them, and again how that moves up in maturity within the cults. And finally, we have the gorgeous pentacles. I love this picture. I love the simplicity of this, but yet again, there's very intentional colours going on. Again, very simple, but a lot of intention. If you look at ant medicine, you can see how they work together for the same cause. But also there's this thought of working towards something, or potentially a bit of an uphill journey, struggle. It really depends how you want to add upon that. The squirrel is perfect for the Four of Pentacles and superbly adorable. I feel like this opens up the potential for both light and shadow, because do squirrels harvest like nobody's business to a point where they don't need to? Yes, they like the stuff. But also you can see that as a positive structure, because that's how they survive. And it turns out the reason that squirrels continuously hide so much stuff, a lot of the time half of that food will either be lost or ruined, or I think even they can't necessarily find it, someone else finds it. And so a lot of what they do is productive because it's forward thinking. It's okay, how can I have enough? How can I put so much down to have enough for when I need it? The Five of Pentacles and the broken crystal. I've got the fish for the 6. The 7 with a tree. I love that you can see all the different stages of growth in this particular picture. And it's not forgetting that the roots exist no matter how much the growth has, you know, far to go. There's still all of this has occurred in the meantime. And trees, they take a very long time to get to their end result. So again, really good message for the 7 of Pentacles. The beaver really is a master at their craft, for sure, and so that makes complete sense for me for the 8 of Pentacles. I'm aware I don't want to ramble too much. The 9 of Pentacles is the first card I ever pulled, so if you want to hear my thoughts on that, then they are on Instagram. And then the wonderful elephant, which I know is a redraw because Jillian put a picture up of it and asked us to guess, which was good fun. And there's so many layers again to the elephant, and the wisdom and the sturdiness and their general presence, and how that can all be tied into the physical and bodily manifestation of the pentacles and of the earth. And finally we move into the last suits, and here you can see we've got the buffalo. Is this child buffalo not the most adorable wee little thing that you've ever seen? It's so cute. And then you've got the youth. So again, you can see here that there is growth coming into play and movement, but it's a lot more gentle in this card. And for sure, out of all of the youths or all of the knights, the pentacles for me and as a whole is generally the sturdiest or even steadiest of the 4 knights. Finally, for buffalo as the earth suit and the pentacles, buffalo is often seen as a bringer of abundance, so a very supportive and positive message in that way. Strong and grounded medicine. They have a very big connection to the earth, and there's sort of a message, I guess, of sacredness and the physical aspects of life in all of its glory. As sort of a physical being, their very nature represents that steadiness that we see within these cults if they're at their best. You know, if they are in their element, so to speak, and not in their shadow aspects. The message for these is to be, and it feels like it's that connection to the earth in a calm and grateful way, so definitely gratitude as well. As I say, I would encourage people to still consider their own understanding of the animals if that's something you do, and if you don't, to not feel like you have to, because this deck for me just hasn't felt like it's pushing that agenda at all, and it's just been a real joy to use because of those elements that I enjoy, But as you can see from my discussions, I don't work with astrology very much. Now, someone who works with astrology might review it and really focus on that element. Just finish shuffling them. I will pull you one card and I will read you the message from the guidebook so that you can have an understanding of how the guidebook speaks. So we received the Eight of Cups, and the key word is embracing the unknown. A stack of cups is piled in a tower and a few of them slip from the top. The bear walks away from what it has built. Then the message, the Eight of Cups represents a time when you have made an emotional decision to walk away from everything you know and understand. The way things have been may have caused you to feel emotionally down, and you are now concluding that this path does not resonate with you anymore. You seek something different, something bigger, something more closely aligned with your truth. You must embrace bravery as you walk into the unknown to discover what feels right. Hold the strength of bear energy as you bravely step forward in your quest for spiritual truth. As hard as the journey may seem, it will be deep and meaningful at a soulful level. Additional meanings: emotional freedom, discovery, new truth, transition, change, abandonment and solitude. Reverse meaning: scared of change, stuck in a rut, paralysed with fear, aimlessness, staying too long, fleeing too fast. So you can see you get quite the information in the guidebook alone. It does speak of bear's strength. It does feel like it discusses whether, what I said about hibernation, almost going into yourself in that capacity, but emotionally, and knowing when to move on. And it very much is depicted right there visually for you. Just as a final look, I will pull two more cards just so that you can see what they look like together as a spread. Moving away, transitioning and moving on to new passions or focus. That's just a very, very simplistic view of what I'm seeing. I'm very, very glad for the opportunity to have been gifted this deck so that I could review it, because it was very much on my wish list. I watched the creation from the very beginning. It was so much fun being able to engage with Jillian and having that opportunity to share thoughts and opinions, and it just be a bit more of an interactive experience. So I appreciate that doesn't work for every artist, but it most certainly was quite novel for many of us, I feel, to be able to do that. Just putting the deck through its paces and having it in hand and using it from my own personal experience, there's been no disappointment in any way, shape or form. Actually, I was more intrigued before I got it to see how it would work in spreads with the white space, because I was very aware of that. And as I've said to you, working with it in person versus seeing it on, say, Instagram pictures, that's not been a problem. If anything, that's actually been a supportive function of the deck that I've personally enjoyed. If you've got any questions, something that I didn't answer in particular that you want to know, then please comment below. Let me know what you thought of the review, what you think of the deck as a whole, and I will leave some links for Jillian and where you can get the lovely deck from. Have a wonderful day, you guys, and I will catch you again soon.